Welcome to the Department of Child, Family, and Adult Services training on non-discrimination and federally assisted programs regarding the Division 21 regulations. The purpose of this training is to understand the DCFAS staff responsibilities with regard to non-discrimination in services and programs. You will also need to understand the requirements to provide free language services for limited English proficient individuals and reasonable accommodations for those with disabilities. You will also know where to refer an individual who wishes to make a civil rights discrimination complaint. Civil rights and social service programs. Civil rights are the rights of individuals to receive equal treatment based on certain legally protected classes. We believe children, youth, young adults, parents, and adults should have access to effective services that support their overall well-being and help them achieve their full potential. We believe in listening to individuals and families about their culture and community. The legal context for this training is taken from the Title VI Civil Rights Act of 1964. This ensures that government funds are not used to support discrimination. Other legislation and regulations include Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990, Age Discrimination Act of 1975, the California Civil Code, Section 51, the California Government Code, Sections 4450 and 11135, and the CDSS Manual of Policies and Procedures. Division 21 from the Manual Policy and Procedure applies to Child Protective Services and Senior and Adult Services as they are administered by the California Department of Social Services. Division 21 enforces applicable state and federal laws related to discrimination. It mandates that all county social service agencies that receive federal, state, or county funds establish and enforce a non-discrimination policy. It ensures that discrimination does not cause a person to be treated differently when administering programs. No person shall, because of race, color, national origin, political affiliation, religion, marital status, sex, age, or disability, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any program activity receiving federal or state financial assistance. Information about individual civil rights, including the right to make a discrimination complaint directly with the county's civil rights coordinator. This information is posted on the California and Federal Employment Notices poster and included in the CDSS publications, located in every DCFAS lobby or reception area. This is the Pub 13 for CPS and IHSS, or the Pub 470 for APS. Equal access to services, including assignment of a special skills worker certified in a particular language or culture, and a language or an American Sign Language interpreter, if available. Timely accommodations for physical and mental disability. This applies to Child Protective Services and Senior and Adult Services as they are administered by the California Department of Social Services. What is discriminatory practice? The county cannot do the following acts based solely upon an individual belonging to a certain protected class. They cannot deny that individual benefits or services, provide benefits or services that are different than what is provided to others, subject the individual to separate treatment in any matter related to the individual's receipt of benefits or services, restrict the individual from enjoying an advantage or privilege enjoyed by others, treat the individual differently, or deny an opportunity to participate in a program. Protected classes. A protected class is a characteristic of a person which cannot be targeted for discrimination. The following are protected classes: national origin, color, race, ancestry, ethnic group, age, sex, gender identity, gender expression, sexual orientation, marital status, domestic partnership, medical condition, genetic information, religion, political affiliation, and disability. Americans with Disabilities Act, also known as ADA. The Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990 is the most comprehensive federal legislation that prohibits discrimination against people with disabilities. Who is protected by ADA? Regulations state that an individual with a disability is a person who has a physical or mental impairment which substantially limits one or more major life activities, has a record of such impairment, or is regarded as having such an impairment. Accessibility. Accessibility refers to the usability of public facilities by individuals with disabilities. The county is required to ensure that programs and activities are readily accessible to individuals with disabilities. Services to clients with disabilities. We need to provide reasonable accommodations to clients as needed. A reasonable accommodation is a modification or adjustment that allows a person with a disability to enjoy the same benefits or services as people without disabilities. Determining a reasonable accommodation is an interactive process between the client and the county employee. Accommodations. Remember, not all disabilities are obvious. Accommodation examples: home visits, when a client cannot physically come into the county office, adjusting the length of the interview to meet the client's needs, reading the documents to the client, or if the client brought someone to assist them, allow it with the proper release of information, use of Braille, large print, or audio tapes, and the use of TDD, TTY, or California Relay services. Service animals. Service animals are individually trained to do work or perform tasks for people with disabilities. Businesses and organizations that serve the public must allow people with disabilities to bring their service animal into all areas of the facility where customers are normally allowed to go. Service animals must be harnessed, leashed, tethered, and/or the individual must maintain control of the animal through voice, signal, or other effective controls. Animals whose sole function is to provide comfort or emotional support do not qualify as service animals. In regards to service animals, staff can ask if the animal is a service animal and can ask what work or task the animal has been trained to perform. However, staff cannot require a special identification card or training documentation for the animal, and they cannot ask that the animal demonstrate its ability to perform the work or task. A person with a disability cannot be asked to remove their service animal from the premises unless the animal is out of control and the handler does not take effective action to control it, and the animal is not housebroken. A staff person must offer an alternative opportunity to obtain services if the animal must leave the premises. Generally, allergies or fear of dogs are not valid reasons for refusing service to people using service animals. Limited English Proficiency, or LEP. DCFAS must take reasonable steps to ensure access to program information and services for persons with limited English proficiency. What is limited English proficiency? Also known as non-English speaking for purposes of Division 21. Defined as persons whose primary language is other than English, and the language must be used to effectively communicate program information and requirements. Individuals may have limited ability to read, speak, write, or understand English. Please note, failure to provide appropriate language services may be discrimination under the basis of national origin. Here are some free language resources for limited English-speaking applicants and recipients. The county meets the requirement for free language resources by providing bilingual staff, qualified interpreter services via in-person or over the phone, sign language interpreter services via in-person or video relay, resource binders, and pamphlets. So what is your responsibility as an employee? All public contact staff have a role in ensuring non-discrimination in CPS and SAS programs. That role may differ according to specific job classifications. You need to provide information to the public through the Pub 13 for CPS and IHSS and the Pub 470 for APS, as well as public postings. You need to ensure programs and activities are accessible to all, including those who are limited English speaking and/or those with disabilities. You need to gather information using either the CS-106 or the CS-107. You need to make sure you document in the case record what accommodations were offered and which accommodations were provided. You need to not use discriminatory practices. And you need to process discrimination complaints without retaliation. Provision of information. How do we provide information to the public? We inform the public how non-discrimination policies apply to our programs. We notify the public of the name, telephone number, and address of the Civil Rights Coordinator. And we have public posters, hand out pamphlets, and provide notices. Within the provision of information, there are also certain lobby requirements. You will see posters, signs, and publications in the lobbies. For posters, there is the Everyone is Different but Equal Under the Law and the Americans with Disabilities Act public notice. For signs, you will see the ISA or wheelchair sign with assistance available on request in multiple languages. Existence and location of benefits and services, including days and hours of operation, and program information and instructions must be in all threshold languages of each bureau. For publications that are found in the lobby, it is your Rights Under California Welfare Programs, which is either the Pub 13 or the Pub 470. Public notification requires prominent display of posters. Next time you're in your lobby, see if you can find these. Everyone is different but equal under the law, and justice for all. Publication 13 and Publication 470. The Pub 13, which is used for CPS and IHSS, and the Pub 470, which is used for APS, must be available in all county office lobby areas and must be available in all languages printed by CDSS. These pamphlets spell out the client's rights. They specify that multilingual services are available. They explain the steps a person can take if they do not agree with the county's actions. This is specifically for CPS and IHSS on the Pub 13 and not for APS on the Pub 470. They outline actions that can be taken for discrimination complaints, and they identify state and federal contacts. Social workers must provide the Pub 13 or the Pub 470 to applicants and recipients at the initial point of contact. They must provide the Pub 13 and the Pub 470 at each renewal or new referral or when a new client becomes involved, and they must provide the Pub 13 or the Pub 470 in the appropriate language. Gathering information, the social worker's responsibilities. At the first face-to-face contact with the client and with each new referral, the social worker shall perform the following tasks. They should inform the client of their civil rights, the availability of language services, and availability of accommodations for mental and physical disabilities. They should give every client a copy of the Pub 13 for CPS or IHSS, or the Pub 470 for APS in the client's primary language. They should complete the following forms with the client. The CS-106 Special Skills Service Request Form, and this is for CPS and APS only. The CS-106B, the American Indian Ancestry Questionnaire, if applicable, and this is for CPS only. And the CS-107, the Request for Accommodation of Disability Form, and this is for CPS and APS only. The social worker's responsibilities continued. If the client declines to complete the CS-106 and identify their culture or language, the social worker should identify the culture or language to the best of their ability, write refuse to sign, and then date the form. Continue efforts to encourage the client to self-disclose their culture or language during subsequent meetings. If the client declines a culture or language service, and there is a concern that the client is in need of these services, please consult with your supervisor. Documentation. Document the ethnic origin, primary language, and whether the applicant or recipient requested a special skills caseworker. If the individual is non-English speaking, additional documentation is needed as follows: the acceptance or refusal of forms written and offered in their primary language, and the acceptance or refusal of special skills social worker services if applicable. The social worker should also document the method used to provide bilingual services. For example, the assigned worker is bilingual, other bilingual employee act as an interpreter, there was a volunteer interpreter used, or the client provided an interpreter. You should also document that the client was informed of the potential for ineffective communication when they provided their own interpreter. Please note, obtain a consent for release of information and document when using an interpreter who is other than a county employee. Staff should request an individual's preferred method of contact and document that preferred method of contact each time they see them. If the individual is non-English speaking, additional documentation is needed as follows. At the initial contact or reassessment, request the individual's preferred method of contact, such as phone, email, or written. Staff should document at each contact with the individual that the preferred method of contact was utilized. Example: client contacted via telephone with interpretive language services provided by a county contracted agency. Telephone is the client's preferred method of contact. Please note, staff should obtain consent for release of information and document when using an interpreter who is other than a county employee. The social worker should also document in all Division 21 activities. Upload a copy in the appropriate section of the case. What is a discrimination complaint? A discrimination complaint is when someone alleges the delay or denial of services and benefits, or alleges being treated differently due to one or more of the following: national origin, color, race, ancestry, ethnic group, age, sex, gender identity, gender expression, sexual orientation, marital status, domestic partnership, medical condition, genetic information, religion, political affiliation, or disability. How to file a discrimination complaint. Upon receiving a complaint of discrimination, staff should immediately notify their supervisor and the Civil Rights Coordinator. The DCFAS Civil Rights Coordinator is Susan Kopp. She can be reached at 916-875-2000. The email address is dcfas/ombudsman@sackcounty.net. Here are some additional ways to file a discrimination complaint. There's the state level with California Department of Social Services, Civil Rights Unit. And there is also the federal level, which is the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Office of Civil Rights. Discrimination complaint procedures. Staff shall ensure that all complaints of discriminatory treatment are handled professionally. Staff shall not discourage a request to file a complaint. Staff shall not intimidate, threaten, coerce, or retaliate against an individual because he or she has filed a complaint of discrimination. The identity of the complainant and the staff person alleged to be the subject of the complaint of discrimination must be confidential except to the extent necessary to carry out the investigation. Staff shall cooperate with the Civil Rights Coordinator regarding any investigation. Responsibilities of the Civil Rights Coordinator. It is the responsibility of the Civil Rights Coordinator to investigate and respond to civil rights complaints filed against DCFAS employees and contract providers. They serve as the DCFAS liaison with the California Department of Social Services Civil Rights Unit. They monitor and facilitate the compliance with Division 21 regulations. They facilitate the state audits of DCFAS. They update the DCFAS Civil Rights Compliance Plan. They provide support and training, and they collaborate with management to implement needed changes to ensure non-discrimination and equal access to DCFAS services happen. Civil Rights Compliance Reviews. The Civil Rights Compliance Review is a way for the state to ensure that DCFAS is in compliance with Division 21 requirements. These reviews occur at the California Department of Social Services Civil Rights Unit's discretion. The CDSS Civil Rights Unit conducts the review. It includes review of case records, interviews with county staff, looks at accessibility to persons with disabilities, and reviews pamphlets or other printed materials. The Civil Rights Coordinator prepares the compliance plan and coordinates the review. Civil Rights Advisory Groups. The Civil Rights Caucuses were formed to advise the department directors on ways to implement and administer provisions of federal and state non-discrimination laws. The Civil Rights Caucuses are comprised of staff from the Department of Child, Family, and Adult Services, the Department of Human Assistance, and the Department of Health Services. The caucuses ensure that employment practices and the administration of programs and public assistance are non-discriminatory. They promote positive human relations and intergroup relations, sponsor educational forums and activities, serve as a resource for information sharing, research, support, consultation, and technical assistance. They help DCFAS, DHA, and DHS serve Sacramento County's culturally diverse communities. Here is a list of the currently chartered caucuses. Please note, caucus information and resources can be accessed through the DCFAS intranet page under Quick Links and click on Caucuses. The Multicultural Diversity Task Force, or MCDTF, is a coalition of these groups. The MCDTF meets every other month to discuss and study issues and may make recommendations to the directors of DHA, DHS, and DCFAS. The Directors and Caucuses Chairs meeting is held quarterly. Here are some final reminders. Please remember to disseminate the Division 21 information through your Pub 13 and your Pub 470. Please ensure that programs and activities are accessible to all. Please document appropriately in the case record. Do not use discriminatory practices. Do not discourage a request to file a complaint. And do not intimidate, threaten, coerce, or retaliate against an individual because the individual filed a complaint of discrimination.
I remember to take the quiz in my learning.